kiss for you.
So I decided to do what I thought was going to be hard but relatively straightforward, trying to make a character that I can use for a lot of my videos, right? I knew that trying to learn what is basically 3 different jobs, although I didn't know that at the time, would be quite challenging, but it wasn't going to be something unreasonable. Judging by the fact that I've had to do this part of the recording like 7 different times because live technical problems, examples, and other things keep preventing me from doing anything, yeah, I would say it's pretty difficult. So I originally simply just wanted a character that I could use for my videos to be able to have something like a talking head without the actual talking head part, right? Something that was more interesting than that to kind of spice up the reviews. And because of that, I decided off on this journey to try and do the entire thing, designing, rigging, and animating a character that I could use for that. I originally started doing that because I had gotten a drawing tablet, which I will bring up here, for Christmas, that I was interested in kind of just experimenting with, right? Hooked it up to my PC, and I was like, okay, great, this is what I'm going to use to do my character, right? One of these things. And I did that. I used it for a couple hours, and I realized, wow, I hate this thing. Not because the tablet itself is bad, but because the software utilizing it in Windows was functionally useless in the sense of being able to get it to work and function well and just kind of respond the way it needs to, or the way at least I expected. So I pretty much packed it all up and was like, okay, nah, right? And that's where I pretty much left it after trying to figure it out for a bit. It was like, okay, the thing I thought I wanted and was trying to do it with wasn't going to work. And so the only way that I would ever actually be able to get any other form of being able to draw on a device like this in a comfortable manner is if I got an iPad, right? And I was like, I'm not in the market for an iPad. I don't really need an iPad. I'm not using it for anything. So I wasn't as interested in that. Well, along comes around a couple months later, and I'm like, yeah, man, I might as well get an iPad. And it was actually sparked by a conversation I had with a relative that they were talking about, oh, you know, I'm using my phone a lot for various things, and I should probably be using a bigger screen if I want to not only protect my eyes or whatever else, but just kind of like, you know, have a bigger screen to do a lot of things I could do on my phone and that stuff. The other reason I wanted it was because I was trying to replace my aging MacBook Pro, and I needed something that could do a lot of those features and things. And so I made a video on the iPad. I reviewed it, but now all of a sudden I have access to this device, which I would typically not have access to in most circumstances. And I also got the Apple Pencil Pro with it. So now I have the premium and premier opportunity to go and start using some of the apps that people like Procreate to try and make this model, right? And that is basically how this model here comes to be. Which I will open up here, which I got rid of course, but I will open up here. So this is like 60 layers, I think it is, nestled in between these things, right, to kind of make the model, coloring, and all that. I eventually make the model after I think of it about 2 weeks. I go through that, and like, okay, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Now time to animate it. And that is where I immediately become, oh my god, I'm an idiot, right? Or very quickly realize that anyway. So Procreate, iPad, things are going well, made the model. Also made an expression set for the model that's this. Pretty happy with how these turned out. Feeling good right now. I'm like, okay, how do I animate that? What do I do? Looking up animation software, Moho becomes a very favorite option because I can get a license for it for about $30 and do that. I learn a little bit of Moho, learn about some tutorials, and I eventually get this. This is a rig. Very basically, it is connecting bones to various parts and layers of your model so that you can move it and animate it. As you can see, I can move the arm and all that. You'll quickly realize that this kind of breaks it. I can fix a bunch of these, but the overall problem I end up having with this, what's called vector-based animation, is that no matter what you do, this model is not set up to animate in this capacity, right? It's supposed to animate. Let me open up Moho again. It's supposed to animate like you see here on screen with very flat textures, right? This kind of thing, right? So where you can actually animate these rigs. Let's do this, right? You can animate these rigs and it's not going to look weird. I can zoom in and these arms are very flat textures, right? It's these things. You can bend them and it doesn't look weird that these are bending because they're very flat mount. Now you can do this and break the hand, but as long as you use it like within a small range of motion, you're not going to do anything. This stretches pretty normally, right? This goes here. You can move this, you can move this. Like none of these look too weird and these don't move because they're on a little bat here, right? You can move the bat. You can move the bat wings. That doesn't look weird. You can move, bat wings. You can move them up and down. And so this is kind of the style that Moho likes to use. And my thing is obviously not that. And so it starts to break down, which is annoying because I spent like a couple weeks on it. So I'm like, okay, let me try something else. What are the iPad options? Because Moho's like PC exclusive, right? So like, okay, what are the iPad options? Maybe I just need something simpler. So I check out Toon Squid, which I can pop up here. Let's go Toon Squid. This is an iPad exclusive app here. I wonder if I can get Toon Squid. It is a mostly hand animated frame by frame option, right? Very nice, very quality piece of kit, especially for like $10, I think it is. Right, has even some bone rigging, but I did that. I rigged it up in bones, rigged it up in the kind of, at least what they had at the time of bones and these kind of kinetics, right? And it did not work well. It had the same problem. I also tried it in frame by frame and then very quickly realized this model here is extremely detailed, by frame standards, and is not really going to work. So pretty much I made a model that is too detailed to reasonably be used in vector-based or in frame by frame animation. So what do I do now? And the answer is I have no clue. What I end up doing is kind of milling around on it, figuring out maybe, okay, if I just use it in a couple videos and something I'm able to get used to, kind of like having some switches between various facial animations here, switching out into the main body. I do have another version of this character here this is an old one, right? But like where I can put the face on here and he kind of looks like this. And I was like, okay, maybe I can just do that and use that and it would be fine. And then I hear, interestingly, about a software called Live2D, which is used frequently in the VTuber community for creating, I guess, animations and stuff like that, right? You can see on the background here. Now, it doesn't have to be VTube stuff, but it frequently is used for that. And it's able to, as you can see, it's able to kind of replicate 3D movement and have a 3D engine with 2D characters. I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. And I looked up some versions of it that aren't VTube models. It was used in Digimon Survive, which is why I was looking at it. It's because I was aware of that game. I was going to talk about that game for the gaming channel, and I was like, what are these character models using? Oh, they use Live2D, right? And it has a free 42-day trial. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Let me try it out. Let me get some tutorials on it. And Live2D is, I think, a very fantastic program. We're going to get into each of the programs a little bit more in depth when I talk about the process and what I went through, but this is kind of just like an overview here. So I went through Live2D, did some of that stuff, and Live2D is here. And Live2D's cool thing is that, it's trying to make your 2D model 3D compatible. So I have my eyes. You can see my eyes are moving here. I have my brow. My brow moves up and down and kind of squishes and quashes. Brow right, brow left. We have head turning, so it's kind of like a 3D effect on the head, up and down. Eyes moving too, right, like that. Bobbing back and forth, all that. And then I can show you in this mode here. If I just zoom in, it can blink, and then I can click and drag, and you can see that it's kind of moving around. Now, you'll notice if I made the nose go back and forth there, so it matches the perspective. You'll notice two things. First off, this looks a little weird because things like the hair are 1-point perspective, meaning it's showing one way only and it doesn't work in a different way. And the mouth isn't moving. And those are two reasons why this model doesn't work well for Live2D. So on the other two things was I made it too detailed, and this one, I didn't make it detailed enough, or at least I didn't make it symmetrical. This is not a symmetrical model, right, as you can tell by the hair. And you can't really do Live2D unless you have a symmetrical model for the most part, because again, if you're going to try and mesh and mold things, you can't have hair that only looks and functions in one direction, right? So, and also the mouth. I hadn't figured out how to do mouth. I thought, oh, I'll just do mouth like everything's. Apparently there's a special way to do mouth. So this pretty much falls apart, but it is the most interesting one so far. It's the one with the most potential, right? So what do I have to do now? I'm now thinking, okay, what do I have to do? And the answer is I need to redo my model. Now, I could redo my model in Procreate. I'll get to why I did not do that when I talk about the process and more in depth for these apps. So instead, I decided I need something that's a little bit more more fully featured and more functional, especially as I was trying to do it both on Windows and on iPad, right? So I decided Clip Studio Paint was the best option, and I do still think it is the best option, which we'll get to again when we talk more in depth on the programs. And so I decided to redo the model in Clip Studio Paint, figuring out a lot more about how that program works and all that. And then here's the red arrow where we're at, putting that new model into the iCloud, transferring it onto desktop and doing that. And again, going back to the tablet, actually. So let's open up tablet here, right? I actually went back to this tablet. What I originally did, I was like, okay, no, I don't really want to do this. And then I got a new monitor, I got some new stuff, and I decided, you know what? It might be time to give it a second shot. Maybe I was too harsh on it. Maybe if I just have a different program, like Clip Studio Paint, it'll work out better, right? This is not going to work. That's why I'm going to show it. This is the drawing tablet on the bottom here. I currently have it set up. I'll probably, throughout this video, there'll be other clips of me showing the tablet, showing the iPad, stuff I'm doing with it. How this is set up currently on my desk, but there it is, right? I spent 4 hours today trying to figure out why, for whatever reason, mouse is on here now, right? For whatever reason, this wasn't working, right? There was no way to get this working. Let me just do there, right? So basically, the reason this is happening is the pen's not working at all right now, right? And the reason this is happening is because there's a conflict between Huion, the maker of the tablet, their software, how it's working, the two displays I have, a 1080p Huion here, which you're seeing, and my 4K Asus monitor, and how Windows handles scaling and scalability. So if I just go back here real quick and disable this, and quickly show you how this is working, right? We have, oh, let me hit apply. Hopefully that doesn't break everything, right? You have display 1 and display 2, and these are at the bottom here. And this is main display, this is not main display. Extending instead of duplicating, because it doesn't work if you duplicate, it messes up. So the reason this is relevant is because I'm trying to match, a couple things I had to do. I had to match the display, I had to do all that, and pretty much it's not working. So I've had to, for the past 4 hours, figure out, okay, why is it not extending? Why is the interface of Clip Studio Paint not doing the correct thing it needs to do? Why is the pen not working, right? And it basically went through a whole bunch of things of figuring out why the Huion software is not working, killing the software. Eventually I got to a pretty decent point. I wonder if I can bring up the thing here. I did pretty decent point where I basically had to reset the app to factory default and then remove it and like close it, unplug and replug the canvas, run Windows Tablet PC Wizard, Setup Wizard to get the pen to coordinate with the thing, and then open up CSP and disabling touch. And that eventually worked. The reason I'm saying it's not working now is because I just did it, record a whole bunch of thing, was talking about it, showcasing how you look it works now, and then it stopped working. So I don't know what that's about. I'll probably fix that at some point, but update on the tablet here. A bunch of things happened. Originally, I said it was not working at all, right? Like the pen wasn't being recognized. That was because I had OBS, this here window capture was a display capture, and that was messing up the settings or whatever that happened. So I set that to window capture, restarted, did this little thing here where you go to tablet PC and recalibrate, and it worked except for it was motion only, right? It was like acting like a finger, like a touch input, right? Which was not good. So I then, after a bunch of research, figured out that you need to disable, go to here, go to Microsoft Wisp Touch, and disable TouchGate and put that to 0. And what that'll do is it will disable Windows Touch sensors or whatever engine so that it can only activate pen as like a drawing device, right? So I did that, restarted, and then I think I did the calibration one more time, and then it was good to go, right? Except for the fact that when I went to record, it broke again. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I set OBS to do things, it should be fine. Turns out both OBS and Motive Mix, which is what you use for the Shure microphone here, don't play well with tablet devices. So what you have to do for OBS at least is go to Settings, Advanced, disable the source, enable browser source hardware acceleration, disable that, restart OBS, and then you're good to go, right? OBS records, does things correctly. This being set to window, make sure that display doesn't override that and mess up the pen, and then the setting there also. The other thing you can do for Motive Mix is you can go here, go to settings, go to more settings, and then I think this window pops up, right? Yeah. Go to more settings, go to your it's showing up as headphones, which is interesting, but you can go to here and then go to properties, advanced, allow applications to take exclusive control of this device. You can hit X. This is currently set to on for some reason. I think because it's just not seeing the normal microphone here, or it's thinking the microphone is not a microphone. Something happened with that, but it is recording my voice and picking it up. So, but yeah, you would do that. Now that did not work for me. So I'm pretty much just routing it directly through as in the microphone here As you can see, it says microphone instead of the mode of mix, and that fixes the problem. So now what you'll see is if I open here and go over to this side, go into here and do this, I can draw, and it's attached, and it's not offset by 100 degrees, and it's not doing motion inputs, it's just drawing. And I'm recording on OBS, I'm talking, it's drawing. Mode of mix isn't on, everything's working great, it's drawing. It's fantastic, it's not gonna break. Now, if it does break, if there is a problem where you open mode of mix or some other application that takes exclusive control of your device and messes things up, you don't have to go through registry edit and do anything like that. All you have to do is close whatever app that is a problem. So if you open mode of mix and that's a problem, you can just close that. And then you want to turn off the canvas screen. So I'm gonna do that here. And you could hear a little ding and it'll turn off the canvas screen, and I just turn it back on. You can hear a little ding. It won't show on here because it doesn't show, it's a window capture, right? So it only shows whatever the last active frame was. But I can go back here, right? And now I can still draw, and it's drawing, as you can see, right? So that is very awesome, and it's completely fixed. So now I can do whatever I want. And if there's ever a problem, like one of the apps is a problem, most of the time it's just trying to remove the ability for it to take control of whatever device you have, right? Because that messes up what the tablet displays. But I fixed it, right? So that's awesome, that's great. And you should be able to do this for any of the things. Now, obviously a lot of this was based on OBS and Motive and stuff like that. But you know, if you are going to be doing recording or anything like that with these models, then you definitely want to be aware of that. So that's basically how you would fix it. Rigging the new model in Live 2D and then making animations and tracking for it in VTube Studio are the things I still have left to do. But with that being said, that is my journey now. Hopefully I've been able to do this in less time. Yeah, okay, good. About half as much time as I spent the first time doing this, which is great. So now I've talked about the journey, where I'm going, kind of what I've been accustomed to so far. Now time to talk about the process. The process. These are sort of basic steps you need to understand about the process just before we kind of get into specifics about each of the apps and structures and everything like that, right? Step one, you need a reason to be doing this at all, right? You want to draw something, rig something, animate something, or model something. These are just references, by the way. Don't take these as like you need to use these apps, right? These are just the ones I personally recommend for these things. I'd probably swap out ToonSquid for Moho just because it's more rarely accessible. But, you know, you need a reason to do this. You need some reason to want to do that. Want to do one of these things, and you need also the appropriate app to do it. The resources, once again, the reason I went to a tangent about the tablet is because it is the first thing I tried on this journey. It is also the first thing that I had problems with. So hopefully, I'm not saying you can't get a tablet. It might be just Huion, the brand here, might be a problem. You could get a Wacom tablet, and that might be better. But I've had a bunch of problems with it, although I do think it's a decent option, especially starting out, especially this one where it's only like $200. So if you can get yours working and not have all these problems that I have, I think it's a good option. But, you know, buyer beware, there could be a lot of problems. A lot of it's not necessarily even to do with the tablet, it's just the fact that how Windows handles stuff, how their software drivers handle it, and then how, especially connecting two displays and extending the displays that are varying qualities, right? This is a 1080p screen, my monitor's a 4K screen, there's stuff that could be relevant there. Obviously, you could get a drawing tablet. You don't need a drawing tablet, but that's one of the options. The other option is an iPad or a Surface or something like that, which is here, and that's just going to allow you a little bit easier access, some exclusive apps. Obviously, it has a full tablet, so you're not just limited to a certain location, plugging it in, battery life, all that stuff. It's a lot more fully functional, but it's also substantially more expensive, and it does take some time getting used to, and most apps that are not Clip Studio Paint are kind of downgraded in that sense, right? They're not as good on iPad as they are on other options. Or, which I'd probably recommend is the, what are these called? Pen displays, pen tablets. I recommend pen tablets because you don't have the problem of having a big chunky thing that you have to plug in and take up a bunch of space and not have it work and have display problems and window problems. You just plug it in, go to your app, set the thing as pen display, and you're good to go, right? So this, not only for being cheaper, but also being a lot less headache, I'd recommend most people get like an Inspiroy from Huion or like a Wacom one for like 140, I think. And just use that if you're trying to figure out what to get if you want like a cheap starting option, right? But for me, I end up choosing the iPad. I also have, again, the Canvas 13, but even though it's set up currently, if I can't fix the problems I'm dealing with it, I may just stick to the iPad. So you need some kind of resource to be able to draw. Step 3, you also need the willingness. I did skip over it, but I'm going to talk about it now. A lot of tutorials, a lot of drawing, a lot of figuring out how things work and operate. A lot of things that aren't intuitive or that at least aren't obvious that I had to figure out while doing this. So being willingness to go through all these tutorials and watch some stuff is very helpful. Step 3, never mind. Step 4, the resolve. You need to be able to deal with the fact that I just spent 4 hours troubleshooting my tablet to no avail just to have it work for 5 minutes and then not work at all, right? You need to be willing to spend 2+ weeks on one model, and you need to be willing to fail after doing that and then have to do it all over again because you accidentally made it wrong perspective or too detailed or whatever, right? So as long as you understand that you need a reason for doing it, the available resources for it, the willingness to do the tutorials and other learning info on it, and the resolve to be able to get through some of the bullshit, then I think this is great. This is ultimately what I ended up doing, what I almost subconsciously even ended up going through. So now we can get to the individual programs. I already mentioned the journey and kind of the programs I went through, but let's sort of talk about them. I already talked about the iPad specifically, so if you want sort of details about how the software works on there, the software I chose, why I chose that software, the functions of that, how they operate, you can check that video on the review there. One of the apps I decided to do was obviously Procreate. I chose this app because it was a relatively simple one-time $13 purchase, and it had a lot of the features I was doing, and it was pretty simple and it worked with the Apple Pencil and everything worked pretty well, right? There was problems with Procreate. One of the main problems with Procreate that I had was if you export to Photoshop files, they have a number of issues in terms of not being, there's 3 issues. They desaturate the colors because of an issue where the iPad color spectrum is different than the one on like a variety of programs you have on Windows, right? They scale the layers incorrectly, and that's important because Procreate is is not vector based, right? It's raster based, meaning if this image here, you have here the image here, and you export that and you want to use that, and it exports too big. Now all of a sudden your quality is diminished, right? Or it exports too small is worse, right? Your quality is diminished and changed compared to what it should be because scaling up and down a raster image affects the quality. So the fact that it has layering, sizing issues is a problem. The other problem is that it does not do clipping that well. I wonder if I can show an image here. These are not going to show, huh? It doesn't do clipping well. So let's use an example. Let's open here, right? So a good example of clipping is, let's see if I can open it up here, my right eye, right? Iris, you can see clipping ID is mesh 76, which is here, mesh 76. The iris and the pupil are clipped to the white eye. What this means is that if I move one across from the other, it won't go away, right? Like it will be within the boundary of the eye here. So this will not go outside this ring here. I can move it. You can see it disappears, right? It goes behind the eye. It doesn't go in front of the eye. Better example is the pupil, right? I can move the pupil and you can see it goes behind the eye. It does not go in front of the eye. So that's what I mean by clipping. Clipping does not extend when you export it in Procreate, right? And so the fact that it messed up the layer scaling, it desaturated the thing, and importantly, clipping destroyed itself immediately when going into certain apps, made me rethink the use of Procreate. The other thing that made me think about Procreate differently is the fact that Clip Studio Paint is also available on iPad, has both a Procreate style mode and a more complex mode, and has some features that I really wanted. As a quick breakdown of that, which just go here, whoops, here's the thing, right? So they have vector based, right? So Clip Studio Paint has vector and raster, so you can make vector things for your line art, which allows you to have a vector eraser, which allows some special interactions, being able to kind of clean up lines easier with the vector eraser. It has vector line correction as well, so you have something called a simplify and a correct line tool they're able to utilize for that. And it has post correction, which is able to utilize and get rid of wobbles and stabilization, stuff like that, right? It also has a bucket fill and very good bucket fill up to vector. It has a 3D model insert, which I'll showcase in a moment. Vector adjustment, line width, and redraw, which is what I mentioned before for the correction. Built-in tutorials, which is very nice. Basic animation functions, which is always good. A massive asset store with both free and paid assets you can utilize and import directly into Clip Studio Paint. multiple license uses, including a permanent license use and multi-license for multiple devices. No issues, as I mentioned, that Procreate had. Again, simple in studio modes, and it gives you cloud storage and credits, which can be used on that asset store, as I mentioned, right? And it also has it has a layout function for drawing tablets, so that it actually functions and looks pretty good, unlike a lot of other apps. So that's kind of the breakdown there for why you would care, or why you would want to be interested in something like Clip Studio Paint. So because of that, Procreate ends up working well. It's a very simple app. It's a very good app, but it ultimately did not work for my purposes and what I wanted to do. Clip Studio Paint is a $63 one-time single license for Windows and Mac OS, or you can get the EX version, which includes a bunch of like animation stuff for $277. Annual plan is what I'm at because it gives me access to both the iPad and Windows version, which you can see is open currently, right? And that is, I think, $36 a year, which is pretty good, especially considering it does earn those asset points that you can use in the store. And it's, again, $36 a year, and it gives me like a 3-month free trial as well, which is what I'm currently using. You can obviously pay it in 12-month license installments as well, and that is $27, or EX version for $77. This is $26 for a single device. If you do a double device, dual device license is $36, which is what I'm paying. 4 devices, I think 20 more, so that's like $46, right? So it is decently expensive, but it is also relatively cheap, especially compared to Adobe or most other apps, especially coming from animation, right? Even if you went to a one-time purchase of the animation one, $277, that is still, I don't know, like 10 times cheaper than like Cinema 4D or a bunch of other apps, right? And it's also still cheaper than Moho, for example. So there's some flexibility in that, right? But again, the reason I chose it is because it has an iPad function, like the, am I still showing the thing? I'm not. Let me show you. Okay. Right. This thing here is what it looks like in the iPad version. You can change from a simple version, which is more Procreate style, and this version, but this version is good, and it actually works very well with the Apple Pencil. Everything's clickable, everything's movable, right? My UI is a little bit different than this, a little bit more complicated, actually, but I've gotten it to a point where I'm really used to it, and I like how it is, because it gives me all those options, right? So then we went on to my first attempt for animation, which was Moho. And Moho is a $400 app, although I did get the 12.6, I think 2017 version of it for $30, which it is frequently offering. They also have a trial version of it if you want. They also have a debut version, which is basically a free trial for like $60. Don't buy that one. That sucks. If you are going to buy one, buy like a couple generations old one for like 30, 40, 50 bucks, something like that. Pro model. And that's what I'm using here. That's what you saw before. And it will be pretty much good to go, right? So again, great application for a variety of things, but not really the one I wanted to utilize, right? It has great features, good tutorials for the most part. The bone system is very intuitive once you understand how it works, but it's just not a very good setup for what I'm doing. So then we move on. So you got your apps if you want simple, apps if you want more complex for various things, just depending on what you're doing, what you're going through. Animation, if you're trying vector, again, you can do like sort of more this kind of style if you want. If you want something a little bit more simpler, Moho is a great option for that. But if you want to do something a little bit more complex, or at least something that's a little bit different, Live 2D is the one I'm using. Once again, has a 42-day free trial. If you want to buy it, it ends up being, it's in yen, so it's a little bit, since yen is quite weak right now, you can get 3 years for $225, or just a single annual plan for about $87. And then it kind of scales down a little bit year 2, year 3. So a 3-year plan ends up being about $225. Do not do the monthly plan. That goes for Clip Studio as well. Don't do the monthly plan. The monthly plan ends up being like $7.50 a month. Just do the year plan for $27. That's a substantial improvement to that. I wish they'd advertise this more, because most people, myself included, would think, oh, it's just, you know, like it's the $7.50 a month, maybe a discount in a year. But no, it's substantially cheaper if you buy a year at a time, right? Similar with Live 2D, if you go purchase and you do monthly, it's a lot of money. And if you do, 3 years at a time, it's even cheaper. If you do 1 year, it's like $87. So it's a reasonable price, again, especially compared to other 3D modeling apps or 3D animation apps like Maya, the thousands of dollars, Cinema 4D, those kind of things. I also, again, has a 40-day 45-day, 42-day free trial that you can utilize there, and that's what I'm using here. Right. It's also nice because Live 2D, similar to Clip Studio Paint, has a ton of tutorials on people using it and how to operate on it and all that stuff. So it's very nice, and also has various plugins, and also has a 80% off student discount. So if you're a student, enter your email and you get 3 years for like $50, I'm pretty sure, right? So that's cool. And then after you're done that, after you decide what app for drawing you want, what animation you want, either Moho or ToonSquid for animation, that's another one. This is iPad exclusive, however, but it's also only $10. So if you want sort of a more lighter weight, one that also works with frame by frame and bone kinetic animation, although bone animation is worse, you can do ToonSquid as well if you don't want to have something PC exclusive, right? If you want something that works on mobile, ToonSquid works pretty well. So you get your drawing here, you get your animation, 3 different options there, and then you have your tracking, your ability to actually take what you've done and animate it. VTube Studio is a very good one. It's free. If you want to remove the watermark, it's $15. I think that's pretty reasonable. It can be downloaded on Steam and the phone versions. I wouldn't recommend the phone versions. They have a very expensive $40 unlock for some reason. So I just get the Steam version and then the watermark for $15. That's basically, you don't have to like buy that ahead of time. You can just use the app and it'll be fine. So that's pretty much kind of what I've went through. I ended up with an iPad I ended up with an iPad and a drawing tablet, but I'm using and liking the iPad more. Started with Procreate, didn't really love Procreate, or loved Procreate, but didn't really like how it ended up kind of working for me. So I'm on Clip Studio Paint now, which works better for me. I have all these, basically. I bought all these, bought ToonSquid, bought 12.5 Moho, working on Live 2D. And that's how I'm kind of able to talk about this. But for most people, I think Clip Studio Paint would be my preferred here. And then if you're doing Clip Studio Paint, see if you can get through ToonSquid. If you can't, I would recommend Live 2D Cubism. I recommend Live 2D Cubism anyway if you're going through the full animation route. But if you're just trying to draw something and have it animate, I think ToonSquid and Clip is a good combination here for pretty cheap. To do it, not super complicated, right? But if you are going for a more fully animated, full body thing, I think Live 2D is pretty much your only option, right? And same thing with VStudio here. So you have a lot of options, have a lot of flexibility. Hopefully I was able to explain that well and kind of what you should be getting and what you shouldn't be getting and the prices and kind of the pros and cons and stuff like that of this section as sort of the process. And ultimately, I think what it comes down to is understanding what you want to do, Step 1, the reason. Why are you doing this? For me, I wanted to do the entire process. I wanted to draw, rig, animate, and do a little bit of modeling, right? And I wanted to do that, and I was able to do that because I had an iPad, so I was able to get a lot of these apps here and a drawing tablet. I didn't end up liking the drawing tablet, but ultimately, I still am glad that I have it if things ever do get better for that, right? So it's really just understanding that the process is oftentimes a lot about what you want to do, what you want to invest, what you want to get out of it, And if you're able to do that and you're able to enjoy the process, you're going to have a good time. First app we're looking at here is Clip Studio Paint because it is the app that has the strongest learning curve, a lot of info on it, but also not a lot of helpful info in terms of how to just do basic things and functions with the app and how it's best utilized in this case. So I'll be going over a lot of that, right, in my experience with it. I am using the iPad version, as I mentioned in the previous section. There's an iPad and a Windows version, and they're cross-compatible. I believe you can also sync your stuff to the cloud and have it on both devices easily without having to, do a bunch of things. So that's good. And it has, as I mentioned again in the previous section, a bunch of features and benefits over a variety of other apps. But there is also a lot of things in the app that are quite confusing or just not explained. So we'll give an example, right? My guy here is symmetrical. So if I go to layers and I click on something like face art, you can see that there is a symmetry line running throughout the entire thing that is perfectly in the middle. Unlike other apps like I believe at least Procreate or some other ones where you can have this dividing line be on the entire canvas, I have not found a way to do that yet. So it is basically by folder, right? And you can tell because if you open up your folder, you see that little mark. My highlight's not working, but I'll just tap it right there. Where it's highlighted, that is your ruler, and that applies to everything in the folder, because if we go up here, you can see that I have it set to show in same folder, which now applies that symmetry tool to everything in the folder. But if I go to a different folder, like left eye, it doesn't pop up, right? Because nothing in this folder has it. So let's just tap on the folder. We're going to go to Tools. We're going to make a Symmetry tool. We're simply just going to put it wherever. We're just going to drag and like that. Now this is probably pretty aligned, but as you can see, compared to the eyes, right, it's not quite aligned. So then you just, make sure you're on that layer with the Symmetry tool, and then you're going to go to, make sure it's on Symmetry, Tool Settings, and then you're going to want to check to make sure that line symmetry is set to on, snap grid is there, editing line is all set. And then you're going to want to make sure that it is set up in the middle, in the center. And now you may say, okay, well, you're checking, tool settings and it's not there. That is because you have to select it first. You have to go to this little object icon there, tap on the line, you'll get this little blue dot that pops up there, right? Now, because you're on the object tool, you can go to settings, and now it gives you the settings for the line. So in this case, you can do 2000, which is the middle point of my grid. And now it is centered, and you can see that this thing, and it's also centered angle as well. So it is a little confusing, right? Most people will be able to figure out, you click on the thing, you drag it and do that, but you might not be able to figure out that you have to actually tap on the little object thing, tap on it, and go to that Tools Settings menu in order to actually adjust where it is. A little bit confusing, but that's kind of the first thing, right? The other thing of note is how that's being applied. So in this case, it is being applied to the entire folder. Now that usually would mean, I believe, that everything in the folder is symmetrical and will draw symmetrically. But if it doesn't, or if you, let's say, apply it to an eye first and don't apply it to the entire folder, what you want to do is go over to here, as I mentioned, and hit Show in Same Folder. And that will make sure that everything in that folder is selected, right? We'll just get rid of this one for the left eye because I do not want there. You just press and hold on it and hit Delete Ruler. A couple of other things organization-wise of how this is working. So we have basically how you kind of want to organize it. You have your base paper, you have your folders, you have, in this case, I have a model here, which we'll talk about in a second. Folders here, you have this little icon, this little square icon there is indicating vector. So as I mentioned again in the last section, there is a vector system in this game that lets you have both vector and raster layers. And we'll talk about the significance of that in a bit. These red lines that you see on these are clipping layers, and the software has a little bit of a weird thing with that. We're basically clipping, you can basically stack them. So each of these things is sequentially clipped to an eye white. So if I turn off eye white, it turns off everything. As you can see, it turns off all the eyes there, everything clipped to it, and that just makes sure things are correctly in place, right? That's kind of the setup there. Again, we already mentioned symmetry and the rulers and all that. An important point on the symmetry, which is the fact that I believe symmetry does not work on clipping layers. So this is just kind of a rule that you may not know about. Clipping layers, once again, are just like, hey, having an iris, being able to circulate around the eye, as I mentioned in the my process or my journey. Part of this where I showcase that's clipping layers, that's how clipping layers work, but clipping layers do not work with symmetry. And what that means is if you try and, there's a horizontal line here, that's interesting. Oh, right, because I tried to line up the eyes. Oops, basically the clipping layers won't be symmetrical, right? So broadly speaking, what symmetry does, if we go to like face details and we go to nose, and we just quickly draw something on the nose. Let's just make this black. Draw on the nose. You can see that drawing on the nose draws on the other side as well and duplicates it. And you're going to want that for siding, right? But symmetry messes up, as I mentioned, it doesn't apply to things that are clipped to stuff. It also messes up in some other important ways. And one of the ways I figured out recently is with the eyes. So let's just get rid of this here. Okay, so this eye, which I'm going to click this button at the top here, as you can see, left eye has two sides to it, right? If I click, right, so left eye, yeah. Left eye here has two sides when I click this button. This is not technically correct. What this means is this left eye, which should only have one side of the eye, has two sides of the eyes. Now, originally, this was a problem because pretty much what ended up happening is because of the way the Symmetry tool works, it did not duplicate the eye here. So I did this entire eye, did not duplicate it on one side. And then when I went to move it, when I went to be like, okay, let's duplicate this entire folder and move it over, there was a bug, or I guess just the way a software works, where it was, you basically had two different eyes. This layer here had another eye over here, but it was hidden. You couldn't actually see it. And so a bunch of back and forth later, pretty much just determined that if you see one element here, right, this one eye having two sections here, it means there's something wrong in your layers, and that you need to unclip some stuff. And you basically would just do that by going over to these things and selecting all of them, taking them out of the thing, unclipping these, getting rid of all your stuff with the eraser, and then putting them back in, and that's how you fix the problem, right? I also want to note here another way that you can get rid of the bounding box there if unclipping all the layers and moving them into the folder does not work. So for example, if I click on the left eye here, do the transform, you can see it has those two boxes here, even on the finished model. But you can see if I go between the individual layers, this is typically how you're able to determine what the problem is, right? And in my case, it is the highlight layer. It has two boxes there. So what you want to do here is on the highlight layer, you want to go to your selection tool, which is this, under selection pen. And all you want to do simply is just do your highlight here. For selection, you just want to do like this, so you get both of the highlights, making sure you get all the surrounding spaces like that. And then you want to go to select, invert selected area, and then you want to click on the delete button, this little circle here at the top, delete, and then you want to click the deselect thing here where it says deselect. So now what should happen is if you tap on highlight and go to the bounding boxes, now it is correctly selected only the thing you have there. So that is the other way if getting rid of all the clipping layers here. The clipping layers, getting rid of them, what that does is it basically reveals any hidden clipped elements, which is the problem I was having when I was explaining it, which is that there was a hidden clipped eye and some hidden clipped pixels that I had made on these, and unclipping the layers and moving them out and doing the eraser fixed it. But in some of the cases, like I just showed, there wasn't anything there, and it is because there's some hidden pixels or whatever on that side that you just can't see, and so you do what I just showed to get rid of those. So it's a little complicated when you want to edit, depending if you're a raster or vector. So what do I want to do? If I want to edit, let's go eye copy, which we can see is the sort of eyebrow elements, right? The kind of like surrounding of the eye. If we want to edit that, we have to go to, let's see, so it's a vector, right? Because you can tell from the square there, so it's a vector. We need to go to either the eraser and then under tool groups go to vector, and that will help erase it, but that erases the entire thing. Or if we want to edit it, like edit where the vector is, we click on this little point tool, right, correct line tool, and we have various things. If we go to control point, making sure we're on the right layer, we can see that if I hover over it, this shows you where I've drawn different lines, right? So we have the line here, the line here, the line here, the line up here, line here, line here. And that's kind of where I did the pen strokes, and you can adjust the points there. If we go back and do something like simplify line vector, we can see that if I go over this, like here, it will change a small amount and start simplifying the lines. The relevant one for this is redraw, and this redraw does what it sounds like, right? It shifts the ability for you to do things. In this case, you can extend this, right? I can extend it over here. I can move it back a bit. I can reorganize what this is. That is how that works. And that is relevant because that allows you to redraw. Importantly, if you are on a non-layer, so if you're on the highlight layer, for instance, of the right eye, you do not have those options. The only option you have, right, because these are all vector-based, the only option you have is liquefy, which is this tool here, liquefy, right? And you have different settings for liquefy. This tool, as mentioned, right, allows you to shift and move highlights and squiggle them around and make them giant and all that stuff, as a tool like this would, and that is only usable on raster layers. So again, just little complications in terms of like figuring stuff out. The biggest thing that was a trouble for me to understand was just how a lot of these elements play together, right? How the clipping layers and the vector and raster layers are different, and how you're able to edit each one to get the solution you're looking for, right? And sort of how this all works. The other thing that was a little harder for me to understand was trying to get the mouth working, right? So at least in live 2D and how you have to do it, you kind of have to have multiple segments, right? You have to have an upper lip, upper skin, lower lip, lower skin, upper teeth, lower teeth, and then some kind of color. I'm going to clean that up a bit, but that's kind of how it sets up. So then you can move things and shift things as you need it, right? Things are broadly just up into folders. So what you'd want to do, as you can see here, I have my sketch layer. One thing it kind of took me for a spin in terms of how this works is, you know, you do your sketch layer, and to me, I do my sketch layer with the different segments here, but I don't focus on it too much, right? I'm just like, okay, little stuff here, little stuff here. Anything that would be on top of each other, anything like that, I'm doing a full body one here, and that's a sketch layer. Then you put your sketch layer at like 25% opacity or whatever it is, and you do it above the starting point, right? You put it above everything else. And then for me, I just set it up as a draft layer. As you can see, set to draft right there. And that just helps, it like locks it off from a lot of the fill tools and other stuff, right? In my case, let's put that on. You can see that my original like Superman weird guy design here did not work out well, so I pretty much ignored that and I started over and made a better model, and I've done basically just the face at this point, right? Try and get the eyes to work and everything. I'm gonna add hair and texture and all that, right? So the other thing that I started to mention at the start here that really helped me and is very nice is this 3D model here. So let's just get rid of everything else and set the 3D model to 100% opacity. This 3D model is very good because it places in the center and it gives you an idea of proportions and anatomy and all that. On the layout I have here, you simply click on any one of these, really. I'll go 3D model body type, which is the second one here, and it gives you a mini kind of directory. So you can select all material 3D, and you have basic hands, delicate hands, variety of different hands, anime face, sporty face, cartoon, youthful, webtoon, sleek webtoon, different animations, running, backflip, chairs, bunch of 3D elements, a skeleton, children, some backgrounds if you want to do some stuff, some I believe this is forest. Let's see if we can drag that into here. Let's see if it goes to the background of forest. Yep, gives you a different background here, so if you want to figure out what you look like in certain zones, you can do that. Billboard is interesting. This gives you a nice little tree to utilize right here that you can use, and as you can see, it is in 3D space. I'm able to kind of like move this in 3D space. I'm able to move this sort of next to the character to get some perspective of how big it is, although it doesn't do the best because this is a 2D tree versus the 3D character. Just, you know, 2 fingers to undo all of this, and it fixes it like that. You also have cubes and some spheres and pyramids and things, and again, some basic stuff here. And then obviously you have all your models, primitive model, panoramas, posing, bunch of other poses here. Very nice. Characters, you have some basic characters. So if I just pop you in, itty bitty tiny, I'm surprised that he's so tiny. There you go. There's a little guy. I'm sure there's a way to scale him up perfectly fine, but there he is. Let's reset. Sure, there's a quicker way to do this. I just decide to do that. Okay, good to go, right? So there's a bunch of different models there, and obviously there's a full asset store, which I'll showcase here, and then obviously opacity. Let's set that back down to like 25-ish. So that's pretty much the basics of this and the setup of that. Each of these things are movable. So for example, if I don't want you here, the alignment panel, I can just click on the alignment panel and drag the alignment panel over here, and now it goes under a completely different section. Also, if I open this up, right, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, because it's split up into 3 and 2s, you can see visually here. If I want to add this alignment to the bottom of the color one, I simply click on it and drag into there, and now it splits it up into 3 different sections. If I want to move it, I can just move it into here, and now it splits it up into 2 different sections. I can collapse it with the little arrows here, either completely so it's gone, or a small amount, right? This is the way I have mine set up, although I don't want this, so I will unselect that. And then my controls go away, right? So it's a relatively useful and understandable app, although not necessarily super like intuitive, right? So you do have to kind of learn tutorials and stuff, but there are just some things that in terms of like managing vectors, raster, the differences between them, a vector allowing you to scale, raster not allowing you to scale, some of the quirks about clipping and how that clipping kind of works, and what you have to kind of watch out for, and making sure your bounding boxes are all set, the ability for you to do 3D drawing in the asset store there, what you want to do with sketch layers and putting them above what you're working on, and then kind of just going piece by piece on top of your other things. The other thing quickly I want to mention is there is a simple mode. So as you can see, I just changed the canvas to simple mode, and this gives me a more Procreate or Adobe Fresco style thing where you have my layers and everything like that. And while you do have significantly less options, it's not like you have no options, right? And you can basically just go back, switch to Studio, and there you go. It's very quick. This is one of the only apps I've been able to use on iPad that feels fully featured and fully fleshed out. So yeah, I've been working on this. This is the star of the model here, and then we'll move on to Procreate if you want to use something maybe a little bit simpler. All right, so real quick here, this is the final model that I've ended up with, right? I don't need legs or like feet because they're not going to see the feet. The arms are set up like this because they're supposed to be tracked. At least one of them are supposed to be tracked. I copied the sweatshirt from the previous design, made the hair here pretty symmetrical, redid the eyes, flattened out, redid the ears, added some neck and some shading and fixed the shading. But what I really want to highlight here is, so all these folders, right? Now this is I'm recording this after I've already rigged this up in Live 2D and basically set it up and everything. Most of that's done. I want to come back here and quickly mention that I messed up something that ended up in the drawing process that ended up making it a lot harder to rig this model in Live 2D, and this is the mouth. Now, these are the layers in the mouth, and importantly, this version of the model I'm showing you does not have all the layers kind of condensed. So I guess I'll give a quick example. Left hair, right? Let's do, yeah, left hair, middle hair, all these 3 layers. So you can see, you know, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. I would condense them. So I just like press and hold and then merge with layer below. And I do that again for this and this. And so that these are one layer, right? And I basically go through all these folders and do that for everything that is not the eyes and the mouth. And that's how you basically condense it and get it ready for Live 2D, right? You still want the basis of what you're doing. You don't want to get rid of anything that's going to move independently, but you also want to condense your layers so you're not messing too much stuff up, right? That's a mistake I made in the first time I did. But with the mouth here, you do still need to keep the upper lip, upper skin, lower skin, upper teeth, lower teeth, and color, so all these things. I messed up. So pretty much if I remove upper skin, lower skin, lower lip, this is the mouth I made. So the problem here is I made a separate upper lip with the upper skin and a lower lip with the lower skin, and I made the upper skin and lower skin different, right? And you can sort of see that if I remove this, that, you know, the lower skin covers a majority of the bottom here, and then the upper skin covers a small part, and it's a different kind of shape. This messes up Live 2D because when you're editing your meshes and it like goes all around the thing, they don't open evenly, right? It's not like, oh, you have a symmetrical or at least a same size blob up and down that you can kind of pull and push. You have 2 different sizes, and those 2 different sizes end up really messing up how you're able to kind of move things and move things around. So I would recommend making these the same. So like, don't do what I did here and have this entire part be the lower skin and that tiny part be the upper skin, and have them basically be inverse, right? Having this one be kind of like an
oval shape, as you can sort of see. Oh, whoops. See here, this is like oval. It's, yeah, this should be fine. It's like, yeah, oh. Can I not? Oh, it's right, okay. Yeah, let me just enable these. So like this part here is this entire section, and then the upper skin is simply, oops. The upper skin is simply this section here. So you have obviously two very different, one being a circle, the other one being like the opposite side of the circle. You don't want that. What you do want, we'll put this in blue. What you do want is more symmetrical. So you'd want like that to be one part, and then the other, we'll just put this in like red. And then like this to be the other part, right? You want kind of overlapping circles that are somewhat symmetrical so that when you pull them apart, when you mesh them, you're able to pull them kind of in the same direction, or at least symmetrically. The other thing that helps is not doing what I did here and having two separate lip things, and again, also messing up because the top lip is and the lower lip are different sizes and not actually symmetrical. Again, you don't want that. You would want, basically, from what I understand, at least just one lip on one of them, upper skin or lower skin, you decide, and then you are basically drawing that on, right? So it would pretty much be like if you want it on the lower skin here, you would basically just go to your upper skin and then just draw, whoops, lower skin, and then just like draw, obviously with a different pen, your lip like that. And then when you move it, you're able to move both your lip, or your visual of your lip, and your upper skin. What I did instead is I did two different lips, and that is also a problem because then when you went to try and move those, you would end up moving the lip, and then you'd have to like glue it, which messes it up. And I spent a lot of hours trying to figure out, after I glued it, why it wasn't working. And basically it's like what gluing does in Live 2D is, you know, you have this lip, lower lip, you glue the lip to the upper skin, right? But because the upper skin is this like oval shape, and you're trying to move it up, what it ends up doing is screwing up this mesh. I wish I could highlight this. It screws up this mesh here, and then it like freaks it out. It like interrupts where the circles are in the nose and like blocks that. It also means you have to like shift around the different points of the mesh, and like liquefy, and just like it just messes up the timing, especially when you're trying to make this happen in 3D, and so it just doesn't work well. So I'd recommend not making two separate lips, making one lip and having the lip actually attached to the upper skin layer so that you're able to just move things out around a little better. If you are going to have a lip, I recommend one lip and attaching it to one section when you merge it, instead of doing what I did here. So those are the two things I'd recommend doing on your drawing specifically to not have the problems I did. Everything else though, between the hair and the eyes and stuff, worked pretty well. The way I have the eyes here real quick is, let me find the eyes. I did do some rearranging just in terms of where the folders were, I believe, while it was working, but that will obviously depend on whatever your model looks like. Let's eyes. Okay, so left eye, I merged all these: pupil, highlight, iris, iris color. I did not merge the eyeshadow, so the eye white and eyeshadow stayed. These got merged. Well, okay, the iris didn't get merged. Did it? Let me real quick check. Here's the final model. Let's go to eye. Okay, so none of this stuff ended up getting merged. So I did not merge anything with the eye. I think I was going to, and then I determined, okay, I actually need a lot of this. So the pupil, the highlight, the iris, circle. I think I might have merged the iris circle and the iris color at some point. After this, just like directly, because the iris color and iris do not need to be separate. You could probably merge those. I don't think I ended up merging those, but it's just something you could do. I kept the shadow and obviously the eye white, right? And these are clipped. So this setup ended up working fine. But I just want to, kind of mention that, like, if you're going to do the mouth and you have to set up the mouth a certain way, you want to avoid doing two separate lips and then making your upper and lower skin that cover up your mouth. You want to make those even so that you can eventually fix those later on in Live 2D. All right, we're checking out Procreate now. This is a lot simpler than Clip Studio Paint in just a lot of ways that can be accessed. So there is a little bit less to go over, but that doesn't mean that there is nothing. The one thing you're going to really want to do and understand is obviously the Symmetry Tool, right? Because that is something that is hidden by default, and that's because when you go to this and go to Canvas, you have to click Drawing Guide, and then Edit Drawing Guide, and then Symmetry, and then click the check mark at the top, and that will give you a symmetrical line automatically in the middle of whatever canvas you have, right? As you can see, my guy here is not symmetrical in any component, not even just next to the paper, but even just in general compared to like where his face and elements are, which is why this older model here did not work for adjusting the model, which I believe I showed at the start, or I might be showing in the next section when I talk about Live 2D. But the first thing there obviously is getting your drawing guide, and you wouldn't be able to understand that if you don't click on the drawing guide little check mark there, right? Because this is where you actually get access to the symmetry. The next thing that I recommend, obviously crop and resize. You have active crop, resize, resetting, settings, all that. The other thing I'd look at is these things at the top, adjustments. Don't forget that these are here because these include important things like liquefy and clone, which you'll be using somewhat frequently if you are trying to at least, fix your model or other things like that. Reminder, this is a raster program only, meaning there's no vectors in here. So all the things I showed in the Clip Studio Paint section in terms of modifying after you've drawn, you don't have those here. The only thing you do have is the liquefy tool, which obviously you get various sections right here. You can do things like expanding and pinching and pushing with the various options there, but you do not have any kind of realignment or redoing tools. So if you do need to like redo a line, you have to do that line over, for instance, right? Or try and fix it with the liquefy tool. So that's just relevant to know. You have gradient map, color, motion blur, all that stuff there. Selecting, similar to the selection pen. The other thing, you have automatic selection. I have a group right now, so it's not going to show, but freehand, rectangle, ellipse, all that. Copying, pasting from here, saving, color fill, all that. The color fill tool is nice. It is a little bit less fidgety than Clip Studio Paint, but it does mean it has a little bit less functionality. So what that really means is that you go to your layers here. Let's just go to face. Tap on this layer. I'm going to do this bottom part here. What you want to do is set this as a reference. Go to your layer below. Drag onto the face, and now the entire face is red, right? Let's do green, and now the entire face is green. And you need to set this as your reference layer beforehand. You also need to do this, for what it's worth, in Clip Studio Paint as well. That is not something I mentioned, but if I undo the reference layer and try and do it in red, it will work because I have the layer underneath it. It's like completely, what's the word? It is completely closed in, right? It's completely kind of in, so I can do that. But typically what will happen is it will just accidentally delete the entire thing, right? And that's not what you want. So you always want to ideally set your, outline, if you have an outline, as your reference layer, or whatever you want to use as your reference layer, so it doesn't accidentally go beyond the borders here, right? So that's the color fill. The other thing you can do with color fill, let's do gray, is do this, and then you can hold it and slide your pen to do threshold. If I do 100%, obviously gets rid of everything. And as you can see, if I do 0, it leaves the edges, right? And so this is very nice to kind of figure out if you have, especially complex options, where you want your color fill to be by just sliding your pencil across the side there, right? And you can obviously undo by 2 fingers like all the others. The only other thing I'd mention is obviously these little check marks here. So let's undo reference. If I click on this, this isn't a great example. I don't think, there's shading on the neck. Let's show that. Long neck. So there's shading here, right? This is not the best. Let's see, pants. This should be decent. Now, as you can see, this is N versus M. N is set to normal. M is set to multiply. Now, I don't think there is a necessarily reason why I hit multiply on this other than to test out the different features, but multiply, what typically that would do is it would basically be what you want to use for shading or for filtering. You can see I have a filter. Well, I don't have a filter on the new model. I do have a filter, and I did use the clipping mask in the multiply for that. But on this model, I simply just overrid it with the wool and just kind of went over it like that, right? But you would typically want to have your shading on a different layer than your color, usually above the color clip to it, and then you would do whatever kind of effect you have there, and you would then set that layer to multiply. So you would do like, okay, you have your outline, you have your base layer, base color, you would have another layer here, that would be your shading, usually, right? You would clip that by just clipping mask, and then you would do your thing, right? And it wouldn't go beyond what it was doing. In this case, it's just the left leg, right? You would do that. You can see it's clipped to here, and then you would set this to multiply. You can see normal does it like this, and multiply is a little bit darker. So that is how you get a lot of that depth that you're looking for, right? And you can see it also doesn't destroy the existing stuff. So this would be your clipping layer, this would usually be your normal layer, and then this would be kind of like your outline. For me personally, I didn't like having my outlines like above that, so I just usually put my outline above it. Unclip that, right? So you wouldn't be getting your outline with any of the filtering you're doing. So you'd have outline. In Clip Studio Paint, I'd make this a vector. I can't do a vector here, but you have this layer, your clipping layer onto this would be typically your just like color layer, right? This would be your shading layer, and then this would be your outline layer is kind of how I had it set up. And I found that the easiest, right? And then any other highlights and things I'd put usually somewhere in this area. Maybe I'd put them above, especially if I was moving them, but if you're just going to be drawing and you're not necessarily concerned about trying to animate it, this kind of setup is fine, right? And that's how I would do that. Otherwise, making folders and stuff is very simple. I would recommend, like this thing, for example, you have to swipe to the left on everything you have here, and then when you make a new layer, obviously it doesn't do what you think it would. So typically what you would have to do to make a new layer is you have to kind of just, I think you tap them and hit group. No, you don't tap them and hit group. So this is the kind of annoying thing when they like get rid of all the buttons, and so you have to remember the stupid swipe controls, which I personally don't like. There is an easy way to group things together. I'm just not remembering what it is currently. Group right here. There we go. Group. So you go group and then ungroup, and now you got the thing, but you have to select them like that. And I think they changed this. That's why I was confused, because typically I thought you could just do that and hit group. Can you not? Can you not just like tap this? There's no group here, huh? Okay, yeah. So you just have to go here and then hit group, and now it groups them. There's probably another shortcut or something with multiple fingers, but I'm using the Apple Pencil here, so I'm not inherently doing that. I don't think there's many other things other than grouping, and then how to like set up your canvas in a similar way. Obviously, I have way too many layers here. I would combine all these. I combine these. I wouldn't combine these. These would be the same. I'd combine these. I wouldn't combine the eyes. I think the eyes are fine. I'd do the mouth, do the face, do the ears. Sweatshirt, definitely do the sweatshirt here and combine these elements. Do the neck, combine the neck elements so they're not separate. But yeah, other than that, and just making a group, and then making sure, obviously, your things at the top are kind of set up like this. Everything else works pretty similar to Clip Studio Paint. The last thing, though, that works a little bit differently, well, two things, actually, real quick. So, click on you. Now you have access to all the options, and you can adjust things like that, right? And you can also adjust how, like, the Apple Pencil works and how your double tap works. In this case, I would set the dropper and all that. Right. So the last thing here is if you're going to share it. If you share image as PSD here, there is a problem. So as I mentioned before, sharing it as a PSD in Procreate, because this is a raster program, it messes up the layers and how big they are, which is a problem in raster, because bigger layers mean, you know, if it's not set up for that, it becomes very blurry and weird. The other problem that occurs is your saturation, because this iPad is running P3, and if your display isn't P3 compatible, then it's going to look worse desaturated. The other thing that it lacks out on is clipping. So as we just saw, you know, these things in the pants here, this would unclip. And if I unclip it, now it looks like this, right? Because I was not super careful in how I was doing it. Now you gotta do this and you have to reclip everything. So you can absolutely do it, but it just requires an understanding that there is some more limitations than there really should be for this, and that you should be aware of those limitations. But overall, it's a pretty good program. It's also relatively cheap. You don't have to pay a subscription or anything, but it is also iPad exclusive, right? So you do need an iPad and you need an Apple Pencil for this, unlike Clip Studio Paint, where you could reasonably be able to use it on like a Windows computer or a Mac, or an iPad, right, or an Android tablet, I believe, and get the same functionality, right? And the subscription does go up depending on how many devices you have for Clip Studio, but the 2 devices I have, which is the iPad and my Windows laptop, and I also have the cloud thing that they give you so you can like sync very easily between them, that is a very nice feature. Because Procreate is exclusive to the iPad, you don't have things like that. So if you ever don't have your iPad with you or don't want to use your iPad because of a variety of reasons, there is no option for Procreate on anything other than the iPad. So you are kind of limited there in terms of, you know, your options and what you can do and how flexible you can be, right? So it really only works on the iPad. And that is a shame, because if it was available on more things, I think it would be broadly a little bit more useful, because right now, again, if you want to transfer things, you got to go to here, you got to go there, you got to save it to your iCloud or save it to like folders or send it off through Google Drive or whatever. And so if you're not heavily into the Apple ecosystem, it could definitely be a detriment to only be able to create things on your iPad, right? So that is Procreate. Overall, it's a good app, but it is not, maybe the best thing for my objective here, which is to make a editable animated avatar. Right? All right, we'll be going on to Live 2D now.
So we're going to be looking at Live 2D now, which is one of the primary applications you would have to use if you were trying to do what I was trying to do, which is convert your 2D image you made in things like Clip Studio Paint into a functional 3D model. I'm going to open up the original one I did, which was Animated Avatar 1 Live 2D, which will showcase the old model here and sort of what I had started on. In this case, I would recommend the tutorial by Merely Wolful, which I will link in the description, along with the other tutorials that I found helpful for the various sections. But this is the original character I started with, which, as I mentioned at the start, did not have a great setup because it wasn't symmetrical, and I didn't really set it up correctly, right? But I was able to at least give some aspects, right? I was able to have the eyes move and make those work. I was able to make the brows move up and down. I was able to make the head turn somewhat functionally, although as you can see by the hair, it doesn't really turn correctly. I was able to make it go up and down and kind of react for the eyes. And then I was able to make the head go back and forth. And then if I went to model physics, you can see in this section here, I was able to sort of make it go up and down, right? But overall, it was rough because, again, the hair doesn't match the mouth, obviously the clothes and stuff. None of that stuff was going to be very functional. So that was the first attempt. But then we look at the complete avatar, which is the redesign that I showed in the Clip Studio Paint section. And other than not having feet, it is a lot more usable and a lot more functional in that regard. You still have the same eye movement, right? But this time it's a little bit more improved. You can see the reflection and highlight changing and moving as I move the eye back and forth. You can also see, if I go to the side here, a little bit of the bulge of the eyes. If I move in the corners, you can see it moves and shifts that way. You can see the brows still react similarly, except this time they're matched. You can see the mouth actually move. So if I do X and Y here, the head moves up and down, and the eyes move with the head, and the neck also moves. So it gives you a little more depth there. The body is also moving up and down, which you can here, right? It does sort of give that 3D effect, not 100%, but you can see if you don't take into account the arms, you can sort of see that 3D effect happening. Obviously, it doesn't look great here because this is moving. This combo section here also works pretty well, but it's not 100%. And then what else do we got? Body, mouth is here. So open mouth like this. There's 2 sets of the mouth fully open, and there's closed, or I can, let me zoom in. So, you have open mouth, closed mouth, frowning, open again, it's all right. And that goes frown, and then you do there, and you move this one, and now it goes smile. So I did have kind of like a dual mouth thing set up there, right? And so that's kind of how I position that. Obviously, you have the mouth and you can close it. And other than that, I don't think I set up too many other things. And this was mostly, again, I following the tutorial. I end up making, you know, a variety of these deformers to try and capture as much as possible, as well as the arms. I didn't actually get the arm thing here to rotate, but I did at least get the movement here so that you can at least move the arms and have it sort of work, right? For a lot of it, and it doesn't break. So showcase that to show, you know, what the final model is there. In terms of things I'd recommend to watch out for, the only thing I would caution is something I mentioned in the Clip Studio Paint section, which is the mouth. And you can see it a little bit if I go back to deformer, head, face. Let's do upper skin, right? And then I move some of these mouth things. You can see where the deformer is and where it is connected to the points here. As I mentioned before, having separate lower lip and upper lip causes some problems. And one of the problems you'll see is, you know, having to effectively move and shift your skeleton there. As you can see, it's aligned, and what you end up being forced to do is kind of moving points out of alignment. You can see these points here kind of move out of alignment, and that becomes quite hard because now if you want to shift this way too, you have to move those already aligned points over to this way, and then you have to go up, and it just becomes, this is a relatively good motion, but then if I go the other way, right, you see some more dramatic shifts, like right here, right? This is rough because I have to somehow mask with both of the skin layers and the lip layers, you have to mask the opening and closing of the mouth. And in order to do that, you can see I have a bunch of these keyframes here, which are just showcasing different points. And I had to add way more than I typically would because I had to get the upper and lower mouth to actually work. So you can see some errors come into play when you have to facilitate that, right? You see all these shifts happening, and this ends up, you know, this is your upper skin. This ends up being way bigger than it should be. It should be kind of this blob right here, but instead it has to go crazy because I made them different sizes, and I had to basically align it with the upper lip here. You can see the lower skin kind of overlaps. You can see by the mesh outline here that it overlaps because you kind of have to work with your upper lip here, right? And the reason for that is because if you go to your upper mouth and you shift how it is, you can see there's some bugs. For a fraction of a second, you can see them kind of like folding in on itself. And that's mostly to do with what I mentioned before, which is that things are not uniform. You end up having to effectively try and save your model, as you can see here where there's problems, right? You end up having to like quickly, within a couple frames, drag it down to try and fix it because your skin layer here is not going up and down uniformly or at the same speed with your lip layer, right? So you get a bunch of things that you try and fix and try and solve. And even then, if you zoom in really closely, it's not 100% fixed, right? Fixed there, not fixed there, but ultimately if you end up, zooming out to any functional level and backing off from it, right, you can't really tell that these things are a problem, right? You can go here and and you can't really tell that there is a problem there. And then if you go here and here, it's harder to tell. You can kind of do it like a little bit there, and obviously this breaks and whatever, but this is in between a keyframe. So there's basically just the mouth that you have to watch and make sure that you don't do what I did, because then you're going to basically have a problem where your top and bottom are freaking out, and there's not a very easy way to fix that. The only other thing I'd mention for fixing various things on the model is making sure your hair is symmetrical. Obviously, making sure that is correct. Obviously, the layers, not having multiple layers for the hair. If you are going to have multiple layers, do your front hair and any back hair you have, make those separate. And obviously, what I mentioned when you're making your model, you want everything separate, and then you can eventually combine them. But that is relatively important, right? Everything else that you need to do in terms of how you shift things, how the keyforms work, how mirroring and synthesizing corners work, when to use a deformer, when to use just your basic attachment to the object itself. All that is explained in the tutorial series, so I'd recommend watching that. It's very helpful for most things. It even talks about the next point, which will be going into VTube Studio and all that. And then you have this complicated system, which again I recommend watching the tutorial for. This basically just sets up your physics. Right now, as you can see, this is a little busted because right now it's just doing, I think I fixed it, but it's just doing the eyes, right? Just doing the forward and backward motion. It's not doing eyeball X and eyeball Y because these are supposed to be independent. And that is mostly fixed by going to preview, settings for cursor tracking, and then making sure your angle X and angle Y are set to left mouse button, but nothing else is, right? So by default, you're going to have your eyeballs set to that. But then when you make, in my case, you make your body parameters or your head parameters moving, and you move the eyes, they effectively override each other, where you have both your X and Y parameter and your eyeball X and Y affecting the eye movement. So then when you get to this preview window, when you left click to adjust the settings, you get both your eyeball and your head form, and it messes up the preview. It doesn't actually mean it's messed up, it actually ends up being fine. But if you're previewing it and you notice a problem, you want to go into here, unset eyeball X and Y, and just have it be on the angle so that you can test like what I'm doing, right? I'm just moving the head, not moving the eyes, and yet the eyes are moving because that's how I set it up, right? So this is the correct behavior that I'm looking for. I think I can show you, right, if I set it to eyeball X and Y and I just do like, right? Now it's not really working, right? You get like some weird things going up and down too much, zipping around oddly, and that's because, as you can see, it's adjusting both eyeball Y and eyeball X when it shouldn't be. So that's the only other thing I'd say caution is how that operates, right? And now we're back to normal. So other than that, for fixing the physics, and then just making sure, again, your mouth is all set, and obviously the things in the Clip Studio Paint experience section, the extended part where I talked about making sure your mouth is good, making sure you've removed all your problems, any of the transform elements. Other than that, the program works pretty well, and there's not really a problem. The one last thing I will mention is exporting it. You just basically go to File, Export, for runtime, export as MOC3, and you want to, it'll generate a texture atlas, which is just all the textures that are a part of your system, and then you want to click 5.0 if you are going to be using this for VTube Studio, right? You want to click for 5.0, not 5.3, because it will not operate. And then you want to save this in your VTube Studio streaming assets. It'll tell you how to do that in that section. And then we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I think overall that's all you need to really know about the specifics in terms of making sure that, you know, some things the tutorial definitely goes over, but might not make explicitly clear. The one needing to export as 5.0 is not covered there. Some of the physics quirks are also not covered there. So you definitely want to be aware of that before you dive in. But other than that, following the tutorial should be pretty self-explanatory for how to actually set up all of it. I overall found that with a tutorial, it was quite easy to do, although somewhat time-consuming, and the other things that I had a problem with, I was able to look up and fix, so hopefully I was able to help out there. All right, now assuming your guy is done, let's move on to actually tracking it in VTube Studio. All right, real quick, we're checking VTube Studio here. I have the webcam on. It should not be tested in both. I'm checking here, it's off. So we got a couple things here. I'm using the NVIDIA RTX powered by NVIDIA thing. I'm going to do that. Going to hit calibrate. So basically what you want to do first off, real quick, let me just X out of this, is you want to go to your change model. You want to make sure, import your own model, make sure it's in this folder right here. That's where you export all your info. And you just set it up. Let me open it real quick here. Final avatar, you set it up with complete avatar, physics, model, MOC, CDI3 JSON, and then a complete avatar with a specific name with your texture, your atlas maps that export. Should have it like this, and that's how all these other ones are set up as well, right? So once you do that, import it in there, you basically just double click on it. In my case, this is this one, show my little frog icon. Good to go there, and now you're set up, right? This is the closest I have been able to get my model to work. It does work a little bit, but there's a lot of issues. Mouth and looking down and having your eyes closed are a couple of them, right? So real quick, under settings, what you were looking at is me going to webcam and tracking and testing. See, this is the NVIDIA one. I'm just gonna hit X on this. Once this is off, so let me turn camera off, choose your camera, check your camera, tracking quality. I'm using the second one here, the broadcast. You should probably be using whatever you want pretty much, but I'd recommend this one. If you don't have that, you would just do the typical media pipe. Tracking, face only, webcam do 60, on. We're back to good, calibrate, making sure everything tracks there, and now it's roughly tracking to yourself, right? Don't touch these manual, make sure this is on manual, never link eye blinking, do whatever you want with these settings, whatever seems like it works for your model. Don't have that. 60 FPS, whatever your webcam resolution or application settings are at. I have a 4K display, so I'm setting this to 4K. The camera is also 4K, so do that. Don't touch any of these. Don't touch visual effects. No need to touch that. I'm using Sprout 2 for showcasing, so if you can record animations as well, but you can do Sprout 2. Sprout 2 is this thing here. So as you can see in the NVIDIA broadcast, let's just do that. I can minimize. Oh, wow, the face tracking thing's on the side. You can see there. That's a little interesting. We'll put that in the corner. You can see how if I just squint down here, let me just do this, right? You can see that you can see that the face tracking is in the corner. My camera is like not positioned next to my mic, so I'm just gonna have to look. There we go. So you should see me as the avatar in the bottom right corner, the face tracking in the top left corner. My camera is slightly off center, so hopefully it's still tracking. I can't actually see what my guy looks like because my OBS is down, so let me just open that real quick. Right, okay. So my guy's like this, right? And Sprout 2, what Sprout 2 is pretty much doing is just enabling that function in OBS. Simply download the Sprout 2 OBS plugin, just type that into Google, and then it should work, right? As you can see, my eyes and stuff are a little bit too animated, and my mouth is actually working decently. I'm surprised at how well the mouth is working, but overall, it's a pretty rough implement, right? At least body and stuff is moving decently. So let's put the mic down. Hopefully that didn't cause too much interference with the mic. That would be bad. We'll just leave that there. So yeah, right. So you got that. That's what Sprout 2 does. You click install. It helps out with that. You can record animations and that kind of stuff. If you go to the customize, this is where you can customize auto animations. You should do the tutorial that I mentioned in the Live 2D section to understand how to do that. And then what else? If you have sound effects and things, physics, I'm just using normal physics, matching FPS 50, leaving these on default. And then here's the parameters. You basically have to finick around with this good amount. For me, I had to make sure that my eye blinking was correct. So you can see it's set to 0.3 instead of 1. So that way I can like have my eyebrows react correctly, right? This model does not have winking, so I can't like do that. There is some problems. I haven't quite figured out how to do the eyeball movement separate from the head. So I can see head doing this while my eyes aren't moving. But if I move my eyes, I don't think this actually ends up working, right? So like I move my eyes this way, it's sort of working, but like not really, right? So these things are obviously finicky. Ultimately, this model is not the best for this, just because of how I set it up. And this is mostly trial and error, just figuring out, what works, what doesn't work. The mouth is working a lot better than I thought it would, but things like the eyes are definitely not. Part of that could just be the angle. I am wearing glasses. It is sort of hard to see the camera. I can show you. Is this going to work? Can I have multiple things? Can I if I put this resolution at 4K and do it like that, does this work? I don't think I can show both at the same time. So let me disable you. Let's go out of VTube Studio. I'm trying to see if I can get my camera to operate. I don't think the camera works while other things are open. It should work. Well, the video camera, because the camera's on, there's a weird thing where like the camera works completely bugged. Yeah, interesting. So the camera does work normally, but VTube Studio may sometimes override functions of your camera so that it doesn't work, right? So as you can see, no cameras set up here. If I open up VTube Studio and I have Sprite enabled, which is this thing, it will show up your avatar. So if you just have this open, god damn it, useless Windows search, holy shit. If you have this open and using your camera, it should work. I don't know why it's only activating when I open VTube Studio. It should activate just normally without needing to open the software, but you know, I think it's more trial and error in that case. So let's go here, enable, camera on. There it is, calibrate. There it is. Now both are good. The broadcast tracker put in the corner, and now my little guy is here. See, and there it is. Can I introduce this? Does this open? Does this do anything? It doesn't look like it does anything. Interesting. I think because only one thing can open, one thing can use the camera at a time, right? So you have your model here, moving around. It does this, eyes move, body moves, with the sprout thing enabled in OBS. The normal camera does not work, right? But you can see everything should be working correctly. And then the only sort of modifiers you have on that are obviously all the modifiers here, which you kind of just have to play around with to see if it works. This is for the Live 2D section, right? This is like setting this up in Live 2D and making that work, and obviously importing anything you want, right? So that's this. So if we go out of that real quick, I want to see if I can do the same thing with a different program, which is Warudo. Here it is. This is for 3D avatars, which I have not talked about in this video, but I did want to at least test it to see if it would work for camera tracking and stuff. So the VTube studio part, again, once you set that up, it's pretty easy. It's one of the easier parts of this. There's not really a ton to make sure about other than making sure your tracking is set up in any of the like plugins and stuff you want, right? For the 3D software, if anything would load, I know there's some AWS outages or something that's causing a lot of programs just to like not work right now. There it is. So this is for 3D stuff. Once it loads, God, it's so slow. A couple of these programs are weirdly slow, even though they shouldn't be. So this loads a different editor for 3D, but it works a very similar way, right? So this is for 3D models that you can basically just easily make in, there it is, see? For 3D models, you can basically easily make in, in VRoid, which is a different application. I'm not really talking about 3D stuff, but I did at least want to test it. So basically what you do in that case is you just go, VRoid Studio. This is a free character creator. So you just make your character, dress up, that kind of stuff, export it, and then you open up Warudo, and then you're boom, good to go pretty much, right? And then you can see I have a 3D avatar. I haven't 100% fixed stuff, but it has more motion up and down, left, right, forward and back. Nope, not really, a little bit. You can see my eyes. I put custom models, so my eyes are accurate. This model can wink, so if I just nope, wrong way, nope. It's not detecting the other eye. Oh, sorry, I'm too far from the mic. It's not detecting. My camera is to the right, to the left. My mic is to the right. The preview window is also smushed, so I'm trying to keep these normal. But the mouth is working more functionally here. I can rotate this model around to show you actually it is 3D. Can rotate it left, can zoom in and out, right? The eyes follow me, which is interesting. So this took like 5 minutes, right? So if you don't want to do the whole process that I just went through of designing your model, rigging it up, and then putting in VTube Studio, you can do this, which is basically just going to VRoid, taking the things you like, going into textures, edit the textures, put your own textures in correctly once you map them, and then using Warudo, which is a free software, to just do this, right? And then you have a pretty functional, this took like an hour or two just to get some of the textures working for the mouth, and then for the eyes, and then for the eyebrows, which you can't really see because this model doesn't have movable eyebrows, but there's that. And then those are just the couple for testing the models I did, but you can really see it, right? The eyes, you can see the squiggly eyebrows, and you can see the teeth for the mouth. And so there's custom textures I put into this model, but the model itself was already rigged, and it's also free, right? You don't have to pay for like a Live 2D license or anything like that. So this is another option that's relatively easy to set up. This is a more complicated system, definitely, but it has a similar thing, similar function for how you track things, similar way to set up animations. I have key points for this one. So if I do like Alt-1, you can see it like sets up different little things. 2, Alt-3, Alt-4, right? You have different like animations, and you do Alt-4 again, and it goes back to normal. So if you don't want to do VTube Studio to set your stuff up, this is another way quickly to do it, right? So if you're not happy with how it got set up in that function for VTube Studio, you can simply do it 3D, basically just set up your guide, dress up, replace the textures with your already made stuff in Clip Studio Paint or whatever program you used, and then import that into that, export the model, right? Basically what you're just doing is the VRoid Studio is your character creator, that you use your Clip Studio Paint or whatever avatar you made in that program to import into this program to VRoid, and then you replace the textures, export that model, and then you have a pre-rigged ready to go model, right? So all you're doing is basically just swapping out the existing textures that exist already in VRoid for free, you know, it doesn't cost anything, with your own model you made, and now you're good to go, right? So that is another option if you want a 3D model. If you want 2D, as I mentioned, do the VTube Studio way, but if you want 3D, you can do this. So yeah, hopefully that was good. Hopefully that all this was somewhat interesting. Obviously it's not ideal. Obviously it's not, you know, necessarily what I hoped or what I wanted to happen, but I do think I am somewhat happy with the process. I'm glad I went through this. I'm glad that I sort of had this kind of worked through the process, did all this, hopefully documented it. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but hopefully it's not exorbitantly long. I did want to talk about my process, my journey, what I went through, what I was figuring out, and then ultimately the result. The result's not great, but I am kind of happy that I was able to do it and actually have something to show for it, right? I just want to note that this was a long time. I don't have any hand tracking on this thing. This took not that long. So entire start to finish took about a month and a half, right? So it was not a huge amount of time I spent on this, getting the model and everything like that. If you spend more time on this, it can definitely be improved, right? So, you know, if you like this and want to see more of these things on the channel, more of these kind of like full guide style videos like I did with the iPad one as well, make sure to like, subscribe to that, and I'll see everyone in the next video, and thank you for watching.